Hello, I'm Dr. Cécile Cosculuela. Welcome to this E.S.L video on English grammar and more precisely on the passive voice. We're working on the passive voice and prepositional verbs because this is one of the main difficulties in this area. So one of the first things we should point out is the fact that it is important to make the difference between prepositional verbs and phrasal verbs. And this point actually is addressed in another video, so please work on that video as well to have your ideas clear on the difference between prepositional and phrasal verbs. In this video, we're focusing on prepositional verbs and the passive voice. And again, we're drawing on the knowledge that is presented in La grammaire expliquée de l'anglais by Jean-Pierre Gabilan, and also to a large extent on La grammaire explicative de l'anglais by Paul Lareya and Claude Rivière. So many of our examples in this video actually come from La grammaire explicative, which goes into detail on the different points that need to be mastered when it comes to the passive voice. So again, as usual, you need to remember that in order to improve your English, you need to be very active and methodical. So do translate the sentences and answer the questions before I do. On parle beaucoup de ce sujet. As usual, R1, O2, I3, you remember the formula for translation. So anytime I want to translate a sentence, I need to ask myself what it means. So R1 is the source text that I want to translate, and O2, its meaning that I want to understand before I express the meaning in another language, in this case in English. So in order to understand the meaning, one of the key things that we need to do, and that we do actually very naturally, is deverbalizing the meaning. That is to say, translating the meaning in the form of images or even a film in a non-verbal form, so no words, only other means like images or films. So if I want to translate on parle beaucoup de ce sujet in the form of images, what do I see when I focus on the word on? Well, not much really, because on refers to we don't really know what. It refers to something that is so vague that it is impossible to have an image of it, or at least a precise image. Therefore, when filming mentally the meaning of this sentence, the only thing we can film is ce sujet. And therefore, that's what's going to be the subject of our sentence. And once we've chosen that subject, then we have no other option than to use the passive voice, which will actually be the ideal translation here for the French pronoun on, because both of them refer to a subject that is not identified. Okay? So the translation in this case will be this subject is much talked about. And one of the main difficulties also here to translate this sentence correctly is the fact that parler de quelque chose is a prepositional word, a prepositional verb, in French, and it is also a prepositional verb in English. You talk about something, so you need to use the preposition, and that preposition is mentioned in the active voice and also in the passive voice. So that is less obvious in this latter case, and we need to remember to absolutely use the preposition in the passive voice. So about needs to be mentioned here at the end of the sentence. Cette question a déjà été traitée. So in this case, the sentence is in the passive voice in French. And again, if we analyze it very quickly, we can see that our point of focus is cette question, and it's going to be exactly the same in English. This question. How about the translation of the verb traiter? Traiter d'une question. Do you treat of a question? No, you don't. So make sure you choose the right vocabulary. And use dictionaries on a very regular basis and make vocabulary sheets that you learn little by little. That's really the only way to memorize vocabulary. So in this case, you already know that word for most of you. And so you need to look it up in your memory. So what other contexts have you seen traiter in? Well, many of you have already seen le texte traite de, etc., etc. And immediately it pops up in your mind, the text deals with. And again, you're paying attention and you have seen right away that deal is a transitive verb that needs to be used with a preposition. So it's a prepositional verb, and therefore you know that when using that prepositional verb in the passive voice, you're going to make sure you use the preposition at the end of your translation, which will be, in this case, this question has already been dealt with. Next one, le téléviseur a été payé lundi. So pay is a very common verb in English, and it has several, it can be used in different ways. And so you need to make sure you know that pay is direct transitive when you pay someone something, but it is indirect transitive as soon as you get something in exchange. So you will, for instance, pay for tickets or pay for an apartment or pay for repairs. And in this case, you get a TV in exchange for the money you give, and therefore the translation will be using the preposition for, even though since the sentence is in the passive voice in French, it is in the passive voice in English as well. The television was paid for on Monday. So again, make sure you use the preposition. A-t-on appelé le médecin? So the verb call in English, if you call the doctor, it means you call him or her on the phone. And if what you actually mean is that you're wondering whether he or she is going to be here any minute because we really need them, then in that case, the verb call is used with a preposition. And the translation here would be, has the doctor been called for? So, next one, on se moquera de vous si vous mettez ce chapeau. And like in the previous sentence, we need to translate the French pronoun on. And again, ask ourselves, what does on refer to? What's O2 in this case? And obviously, we do not know. It is not clear. Therefore, on refers to something that is vague, and the best translation for it is the passive voice. And then I make sure I use the right vocabulary, se moquer de quelqu'un, make fun of somebody, laugh at somebody, and in that case, at is a preposition, and I know I need to pay attention and make sure I use the preposition in the passive voice sentence, which will be, you will be laughed at if you put on that hat. So at is a small word, on is a small word too. Do they belong to the same grammar category? Well, actually, there are different tests that you can make in order to answer that question. And one of them consists in remembering that prepositions are usually used to introduce a prepositional group. So if on is a preposition here, then there's going to be a very short pause in between the verb and the preposition if it is a preposition. So do you feel like reading that sentence like this? You will be laughed at if you put on that hat. And you can tell that it doesn't work, and what you want to say is if you put on that hat, which means that on is part of the verb. It is something that you add to the verb in order to give it a new meaning, a phrasal meaning, and therefore it is a phrasal verb. In French, un verbe à particule. And the adverbial particle can be moved and put at the end of the sentence. So it is possible to say, you will be laughed at if you put that hat on. Le temps que vous avez perdu ne peut pas être rattrapé. So again, a passive voice here, and we're going to use the same form in English. So the translation could be, the time you have lost cannot be made up for. In this case, you make up for something, and you can tell that up is an adverb that you add to the verb for it to have a new meaning, a phrasal meaning, and therefore make up is a phrasal verb which needs to be used with the preposition so that it is actually a prepositional phrasal verb, and you're not surprised to see two little words one next to the other because you do understand that they fulfill different purposes. Okay, can't be made up for. On s'est débarrassé des vieilles méthodes. So again, the translation of on and the same question, what does it refer to? What is its meaning? And you can tell here that there's no way for us to know whether on refers to me and my sister or something precise like that, which would lead us to translating on by we, or other pronouns by they, if it's, two people that I'm pointing at. So in this case, we don't know who on is referring to, therefore the meaning is vague and is going to be translated by the passive voice. Se débarrasser de quelque chose, get rid of something, do away with something. So in both cases, we are going to need to make sure that we use the preposition at the end of the passive voice sentence. So old methods in general, or the old methods, have been done away with. So again, away is an adverb here, and with a preposition. And the main point of the sentences we've been translating and that you can find in La Grammaire explicative de l'anglais with more explanations is that whenever you use the passive voice in English, one of the main difficulties for French students or students of English as a second language is to make sure that you use the preposition at the end of the sentence or clause. Okay, so that really is the main point. And then again, Paul Larrea and Claude Rivière give more detail on things that are very interesting, but maybe more difficult. So let's have a quick look at some of them. Here are 4 sentences, and the question is, are they all correct? Let's read them. They had gone into the technicalities of the transaction. Obviously, what voice is this? That's the active voice. And the passive voice will be the technicalities of the transaction had been gone into. And the agent may be mentioned or not. So is this passive voice sentence correct? Let's have a look at the other examples here. They had gone into the building. So same verb and different, the rest of the sentence is different. And the passive voice, the building had been gone into. So what do you think? Are these passive voices correct? Well, actually, the only one that is correct is the one that has a figurative meaning, therefore the first one here. And the second one doesn't have a metaphorical sense, therefore it's not possible to use a verb of movement like go here or come or other verbs of movements with the passive voice. Other difficult examples, this bed has been slept in. Is this correct or not? This house has never been lived in. Is the use of the passive voice correct in that case or not? And last example, the country is lived in by 8 million people. So 3 sentences that may seem very similar, and actually we need to remember that only the first two are grammatically correct, because the passive voice is only possible when the subject of the passive voice is more like an object, is more of an object, I should say, than simply a place. Yes, so there are special cases like that that you can learn more about in Larrea and Riviere's grammar book. The main difficulty really is to think about using the preposition at the end of passive sentences. That's really the key point that we wanted to highlight in this video. In the next video, we will deal with another important point when it comes to using the passive voice, and that is verb complementation. But for now, we are complete. And well, thank you for your attention. Keep up the good work, and I'll see you in the next video. In the meantime, I wish you all the best.